story that feels like it's straight out of a biological detective novel. It's about a very famous mushroom, a major case of misidentity, and some incredible new evidence that completely flips the script on everything we thought we knew.
You know, we tend to think that when it comes to the natural world, all the big stories have pretty much been written. But what if one of the most well-known fungi on the entire planet has been carrying around a false passport this whole time?
That's the exact question we're diving into. We're going to see how one single discovery forced scientists to basically throw out the old history books and start over. And what they found is a story that's way more ancient and frankly way more fascinating than anyone ever imagined. Okay, let's get into it.
So our main character here is Psilocybe cubensis. You've probably heard of it. It's pretty much the most widely cultivated and recognized magic mushroom in the world. And for pretty much everyone, mycologists, growers, researchers, its backstory seemed totally straightforward. Yeah, for a really long time, the origin story for this fungus was considered a done deal. There was this simple, believable theory about how it spread across the globe, and it made perfect sense to scientists for decades. But, you know, as neat and tidy as that story was, it had one tiny little flaw. It was completely and utterly wrong.
So what was this official story that everybody believed for so long? Well, it all came down to one thing: cows. Let's take a peek at the timeline everyone accepted as fact.
Okay, so the theory went like this. When European colonizers brought cattle over to the Americas in the 1500s, mushroom spores from Africa and Europe just kind of hitched a ride. You know, maybe in their stomachs or on their hides. The mushroom absolutely thrived in this new world. And then, boom, in 1906, it was officially described in Cuba. It was a nice, tidy explanation for why it was all over the globe. Case closed, or so everybody thought.
But just like in any great detective story, the case was suddenly blown wide open by a brand new piece of evidence. And it came from the discovery of a close relative hiding in plain sight on a whole other continent. So, say hello to Psilocybe centrata. This mushroom was actually first picked way back in 2013 by Dr. Kathy Sharp out in the grasslands of southern Africa. Its name is a bit of a mouthful, but it just refers to that unique yellowish color in the middle of its cap. Now, it looked a whole lot like its famous cousin, but luckily, a team of researchers decided they needed to take a much closer look.
And this quote just perfectly captures the surprise here. This new species wasn't actually new to people who grow mushrooms. It had been sold for years under names like Transkai or NSS. People knew it was a good one, but like the study's co-author Brayton Vander Merwe points out, nobody had any idea it was a totally different species.
And this is where the story shifts from, looking at mushrooms in a field to some serious forensic science. To really get the truth about the relationship between these two, the team had to dig into their DNA and crack the genetic code. And here's why just looking at them was so deceptive. I mean, to the naked eye, these two mushrooms look almost identical. You could easily mistake one for the other, but their DNA, oh man, it told a completely different story. They weren't just close cousins, they were ancient relatives, separated by this immense, incredible gulf of time.
And here it is, the bombshell number. The genetic work showed that these two species hadn't shared an ancestor for about 1.5 million years. This was not some recent split. This number, all by itself, just completely vaporized that 500-year-old cattle theory.
And look, they didn't just pull that number out of a hat. The scientists used a whole bunch of advanced techniques. Think of it like this. They used DNA to build a super detailed family tree, and then they used a kind of genetic clock to figure out exactly when the different branches on that tree split apart. They even used computer models to figure out where these ancient species could have lived millions of years ago. It was some seriously high-tech detective work.
So, with this absolute mountain of new genetic evidence, that old case wasn't just reopened, it was thrown out of court. The history books had to be totally rewritten, and what emerged was a story that was so much more ancient and honestly just cooler. And this chart just lays it all out, right? The old story was recent, it was human-driven, all about cattle and ships just a few hundred years ago, but the new reality, it's epic. It's a story about a common ancestor in Africa, a massive split 1.5 million years in the past, and it was all driven by huge planet-scale changes in the environment. So the new thinking goes something like this. Millions of years ago, as grasslands started to spread and these huge grazing animals roamed from Africa out into Eurasia, the mushroom's ancestor found all these new places to live. These massive geological and ecological changes created the pressure that literally split the family tree in two, sending them on totally separate evolutionary journeys long before humans were even thinking about sailing ships across the Atlantic. So, there you have it. The verdict is in.
That convenient little story about the cattle was just that, a story. The truth, which was hidden in their DNA all along, is one of deep time, of continental drift, and of independent evolution. The case of the mistaken identity is finally closed.
So, why does all this matter? I mean, beyond being a really cool story, it gives us a way more accurate map of this mushroom's real history, which is super important for research. It also reminds us that there's this vast, undiscovered world of fungi out there still, and it proves that science is always moving forward. New tools can and absolutely will overturn what we think we know for sure.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought to chew on. This was one of the most famous mushrooms in the world, and its entire history was wrong. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories that we just take for granted are just waiting for one new clue to rewrite everything we thought we knew? What else is out there, just hiding in plain sight?